What is the temperature, Commissioner, about changing the rules in hacking a player because he's a poor free throw shooter and just grabbing him around the waist when he is just mere steps down the floor? It's unwatchable, I've got to say, as a fan of the sport that you know that I am. It's just very difficult to see not only the game stopped, but then to have somebody struggle at the free throw line. Is there any temperature to change this rule in the offseason?
You know, I would say that the temperature is not as high as I thought it would be going into a meeting with GMs, which we had 2 weeks ago in Chicago. You know, from a fan standpoint, I'm with you. It, you know, can be like watching paint dry. It can be tough. Although I will say, and I've learned this, I said this before, that, you know, often the data can prove our gut reactions wrong. And in this case, at least so far, you know, as you know, with Nielsen ratings, you can look at minute-by-minute ratings of telecasts. People are not tuning out, you know, when Hack-a-Shaq happens. But having said that, you know, once again, I mean, it's an issue here from the league office. One, it largely involves two teams, Houston, the Rockets and the Clippers, you know. And on those two teams, it's largely about two players, Dwight Howard and DeAndre Jordan. And sort of I also have a larger obligation to the game in my role here as commissioner. And, you know, again, as I've said before, I get hundreds of emails from high school coaches, AAU coaches, saying you can't possibly change the rule to benefit people players, and especially just a few players, high-profile players who can't shoot free throws. And so I'm a bit torn. Look, and, you know, I've heard Jeff Van Gundy on air say, well, the league's completely inconsistent because on one hand, they're saying guys should make their free throws. On the other hand, we did change the rule for the last 2 minutes of the game. And once again, I acknowledge there's an inconsistency there, and we were trying to compromise. We were saying it's not great from a viewer standpoint. So for the last 2 minutes of the game, when it was being used more prevalently in the past, you know, we changed the rule so you could not put those guys on the line if it was a foul away from the ball. I think now I actually think given that I'm torn on it, I think where I come out is let's look at one more season of data. Because the other issue in a lot of those high-profile games where it was used this year, especially in the playoffs, the team that used it didn't win the game. It ultimately wasn't effective. Because remember, if you know, ultimately for it to be effective, the guy you're putting on the line, essentially analytics show, has to be roughly less than a 50% free throw shooter. So it's really, for those high-profile players who play a lot of minutes, to get their free throw percentages up to roughly 50%. It's no longer an effective strategy. So I'm not against. I'm not, you know, morally against changing it. I'm cognizant that ultimately that we're an entertainment product, and you know we got to keep fans engaged and interested in the game. But I like to look at a little bit more data before I push to change the rule in the league.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.